For 3,000 years, the Valley of Elah has kept its secrets buried beneath the dry, cracked earth of the Judean foothills. When we picture what happened here in the 11th century BC, we are conditioned by centuries of Renaissance paintings and Sunday school flannel graphs. A tiny, defenseless boy with a toy slingshot facing a mythical, towering monster of impossible proportions. We are told it is a story of a miracle, a story where the laws of physics and human biology were temporarily suspended so that a child could slay a behemoth. But the archaeological dust of the Levant and the unforgiving lens of modern medical science tell a profoundly different story. What happened in the Valley of Elah was not a fairy tale. It was a brutal, highly tactical proxy duel in the Iron Age, fought between a piece of heavy infantry and a lethal artilleryman, and the giant who stood on the valley floor was not a supernatural monster. He was a dying man, trapped in a failing body, suffering from a severe neuroendocrinological disease that the ancient text recorded with terrifying forensic accuracy centuries before medical science even had a name for it. The truth of David and Goliath is not a story of magic. It is a story of asymmetrical warfare, geopolitical tension, and a catastrophic medical vulnerability hidden in plain sight. To understand the reality of this standoff, we must strip away the myth and reconstruct the geopolitical powder keg of the late 11th century BC. The year is approximately 1025 BC. The Mediterranean world is still reeling from the Bronze Age collapse. Decades earlier, a mysterious confederation of maritime warriors, known as the Sea Peoples, swept across the Mediterranean basin, destroying the Hittite Empire and destabilizing Egypt. One of these groups, recorded in the mortuary temple of Rameses III at Medinet Habu as the Peliset, settled on the coastal plain of the Levant. We know them as the Philistines. They built 5 massive fortified city-states: Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Ekron, and Gath. They brought with them Aegean culture, advanced pottery, and most importantly, the closely guarded secret of iron metallurgy. In the highlands to the east lived the Israelites, a loose confederation of tribes struggling to establish a unified monarchy under their first king, Saul. They were outmatched, out-resourced, and technologically inferior. The book of 1 Samuel, chapter 13, explicitly records the economic and military stranglehold the Philistines held. Not a blacksmith could be found in the whole land of Israel. So all Israel went down to the Philistines to have their plow points, mattocks, axes, and sickles sharpened. This is the context of the Elah Valley. The Philistine army has marched eastward from their stronghold of Gath, a massive 120-acre metropolis currently being excavated by Professor Oren Meir of Bar Ilan University. They have set up camp at Ephes Damim, attempting to drive a wedge into the Judean mountains to cut the Israelite territory in half. King Saul's militia meets them at the Valley of Elah. The two armies camp on opposing ridges, with a dry riverbed, or wadi, running between them. For 40 days, a psychological siege takes place. Ancient combat was bloody, expensive, and devastating to the labor forces of both sides. To avoid a massive slaughter, ancient armies often utilized a practice known as champion warfare, or single combat. The Greeks called it monomachia. The Philistines, steeped in Aegean military traditions reminiscent of the Iliad, send down their champion to settle the border dispute. His name is Goliath of Gath. 1 Samuel 17 provides an exhaustively detailed inventory of his armor, reading less like a myth and more like a quartermaster's manifest. He wears a bronze helmet and a coat of scale armor weighing 5,000 shekels of bronze. In modern terms, that is roughly 125 pounds or 57 kilograms of dead weight on his chest alone. He wears bronze greaves on his legs, a bronze javelin slung across his shoulders, and carries a spear whose iron head alone weighs 600 shekels, nearly 15 pounds. This is not normal military gear for the 11th century BC. This is bespoke, highly customized armor, engineered for a man of staggering, abnormal size. The Hebrew text states his height is 6 cubits and a span, approximately 9 feet 9 inches. Even if we rely on the older manuscript traditions like the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Pituitary Septuagint, which list his height at 4 cubits and a span, roughly 6 feet 9 inches. He is an absolute titan in an era where the average male in the Levant stood about 5 feet 3 inches tall. But when we look closer at the biblical text, anomalies begin to emerge. Strange, highly specific details about Goliath's behavior that do not fit the profile of a peak condition, invincible warrior. Why does it take him so long to walk down into the valley each morning? Why does he require an armor-bearer to walk ahead of him, carrying his shield? A shield is a defensive weapon. If you are engaging in single combat, you hold your own shield. Why is someone else carrying it in front of him? When David finally approaches him, Goliath does not charge. He stays rooted to his spot, shouting, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" Notice the plural. Sticks. David is carrying only one staff. Why does the giant see more than one? And finally, why? When a teenager with a sling walks onto the battlefield with no armor and no sword, does this seasoned military veteran not react to the lethal danger in front of him? In 1990, Professor Vladimir Berginer, a neurologist at Ben-Gurion University, published a groundbreaking paper in the Journal of Endocrinological Investigation. He proposed a diagnosis that perfectly aligns with the ancient text. Goliath was suffering from advanced acromegaly, caused by a massive pituitary adenoma. The pituitary gland, a pea-sized organ at the base of the brain, controls the body's growth hormones. If a benign tumor develops on this gland during childhood, it causes runaway, uncontrollable growth, a condition known as pituitary gigantism. If the tumor continues to excrete growth hormone into adulthood, the condition becomes acromegaly. The bones of the face, hands, and feet continue to thicken. The brow ridge protrudes. The jaw enlarges. The joints ache constantly under the unnatural weight of the body. But the most devastating symptom of a massive pituitary adenoma is neurological. As the tumor expands, it presses upward against the optic chiasm, the X-shaped structure where the optic nerves cross in the brain. This compression causes a highly specific visual impairment known as bitemporal hemianopsia. The patient loses their peripheral vision completely. They are left with severe tunnel vision. Furthermore, if the tumor compresses the nerves unevenly, it can cause diplopia, double vision. Suddenly, the strange details of 1 Samuel 17 snap into sharp clinical focus. Goliath needs an armor-bearer to walk ahead of him because his peripheral vision is gone. He cannot navigate the rocky, uneven terrain of the wadi alone. He moves slowly because his joints are ravaged by the effects of acromegaly. He stays rooted to one spot in the valley because a man with tunnel vision and heavy armor cannot track a fast-moving target. And when he looks at David, his compressed optic nerves cause him to see double, prompting him to ask why the boy is coming at him with sticks. Goliath was not an invincible super soldier. He was a terrifying, towering piece of heavy infantry. But he was nearly blind, painfully slow, and deeply vulnerable to a projectile attack. And David was exactly the kind of fighter designed to exploit that vulnerability. We must abandon the image of a helpless child. David was a shepherd in the Judean wilderness. In the Iron Age, a shepherd was not a peaceful poet sitting in the grass. A shepherd was an armed guard responsible for protecting a fortune in livestock from apex predators. David explicitly tells King Saul, "When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I caught it by its hair, struck it, and killed it." David is a hardened, lethal young man, accustomed to close-quarters combat with massive, aggressive animals. But more importantly, he is an expert slinger. In ancient warfare, slingers were not light skirmishers. They were devastating artillery. The Roman military author Vegetius wrote that slingers were deadlier than archers, because while an arrow must pierce armor to kill, a sling bullet kills by blunt force trauma, crushing organs and breaking bones through the armor. A skilled slinger in the ancient world used a weapon made of leather or woven wool, cradling a projectile in a pouch. By spinning the sling and releasing one cord, the projectile is snapped forward with the terrifying crack of a bullwhip. Modern reconstructions and archaeological experiments have proven that an ancient slinger could hurl a stone weighing 1/4 of a pound at speeds exceeding 34 meters per second, nearly 120 kilometers per hour. Excavations by Joseph Garfinkel at Kirbet Kayafa, an Israelite fortress overlooking the Elah Valley, have yielded perfectly round, smoothed sling stones from this exact period. They are the size of billiard balls. When a stone of that mass hits a human skull at 34 meters per second, it delivers the stopping power of a modern .44 Magnum handgun. Consider the human moment on the floor of that valley. David refuses Saul's bronze armor. It is heavy, restrictive, and designed for close-quarters infantry fighting. To put on armor is to fight on Goliath's terms. Instead, David walks down to the dry riverbed. He bends down and selects 5 smooth stones from the wadi. He chooses smooth stones because jagged rocks tumble unevenly in the air, creating drag and losing velocity. Smooth stones are aerodynamic. They fly straight and hit with maximum kinetic energy. He places them in his shepherd's bag. He walks toward the giant. Goliath sees a blurry double image of a young man with a walking stick. He curses David by his Philistine gods. He threatens to feed his flesh to the birds of the air. He expects David to draw a sword and engage in a test of brutal, physical strength. But David has no intention of getting within reach of that 15-pound iron spearhead. He stops outside Goliath's striking range. He reaches into his bag. He places a smooth, dense wadi stone into the pouch of his sling. He begins to spin it. Because of his bitemporal hemianopsia, his tunnel vision, Goliath likely never even saw the sling rotating. He only saw the boy standing in front of him. The stone leaves the pouch. It travels the distance between them in a fraction of a second. It strikes Goliath exactly where the armor does not cover, the exposed forehead just below the bronze helmet. The text says the stone sank into his forehead. The skull fractures instantly. The immense kinetic energy of the projectile drives bone fragments deep into the frontal lobe of the brain. The giant's nervous system shuts down in a microsecond. The 125 pounds of bronze-scale armor crashes to the earth. The silence in the Valley of Elah must have been absolute. The Philistine army, perched on the western ridge, watches their invincible champion, their terrifying psychological weapon, drop dead before a sword is even drawn. David runs forward, takes Goliath's own massive sword, and severs his head. The rout begins. The Israelites surge forward, chasing the Philistines all the way back to the gates of Gath and Ekron. This is the revelation of 1 Samuel 17. The author of the biblical text was not inventing a mythological dragon for a legendary hero to slay. The author was recording a precise eyewitness account of an Iron Age battlefield. They recorded the exact weights of the armor. They recorded the exact topography of the wadi. And, most miraculously of all, they faithfully recorded the exact neurological symptoms of a pituitary adenoma, 3 millennia before medical science could explain what those symptoms meant. They described a man with failing vision, sluggish joints, and a tragic vulnerability, dressed in the most expensive armor the ancient world could forge. David did not win because he suspended the laws of physics. He won because he utilized them perfectly. He changed the rules of the engagement from heavy infantry to artillery. He brought a gun to a knife fight. When we return to the Valley of Elah today, the wadi is still there. The white limestone rocks still bake in the Judean sun. It is a place of profound historical gravity. The story that happened here is not a children's fable meant to inspire us to face our personal giants. It is a verified historical account of an emerging nation fighting for its survival against a technologically superior superpower. It is a story of tactical brilliance, intimate knowledge of terrain, and the harsh realities of human biology. The stone sank into his forehead, and the ancient world was changed forever. Not by magic, but by a shepherd who knew exactly what he was doing, facing a giant who never saw it coming.